So in case you don't know, because I never talk about it, I failed to walk the West Highland Way twice. I covered my first attempt in part 1 of this series, which you can watch somewhere up here, and this is my part 2. So use this as a guide of everything not to do when you attempt to walk this trail. So again, we've got a wine because we need it, because this is painful to recount. It's really painful to recount your failures, because I really mucked up, and I think if I hadn't done or had done certain things, this would have been a completely different story. So it's on me. I take it. All right, let's go. So I got home after my first attempt, and as I said before, I was just gagging to go back out. So I gave myself a little bit of rest time, chilled out my toes a bit, and I planned to go in April. So the plan was I would go back to where I got off the trail, and I would return to that area and I would finish the walk. I wouldn't start from the beginning again, but I would finish. And I thought I'd go twice this year. I'd go in April, finish the walk, but knowing me, I'm a bit of a perfectionist in everything I do. I wouldn't feel the same sense of accomplishment as if I'd done it from beginning to end. So I thought, let me just finish the walk, and then I'll go back in October, because it was an awesome time of year to do the walk, and I will do it again from the start and go all the way through. That's how much I loved this walk. I couldn't wait to go back. And my mum, who was such an awesome support, her and my best friend, when I was on the trail and I was texting them both in agony, and they were both so supportive. And when I spoke to my mum when I came home about wanting to go back out, she wanted to come with. So we arranged to do a duo trip for the last 50 miles, which was awesome. I've never done anything like that with my mum. And over the last few years, she's got much more active. She's doing Nordic walking. She does a lot more activity day to day than I did at the time. So I thought she was more than capable of doing it with me. And we would do it steady. We'd take 5 days to do 50 miles. And we would really just take it easy. It was going to be in spring. We're going to have long days. We can just, get up with the sunrise, have breakfast, no rush, take our time, have lots of breaks. However many breaks my mom needed. She's in her 60s. She bought it, bless her, she bought us both a little flask, which still has gin in. And we'd sit, chill, have something to eat, sup a little bit of gin in the evenings, and it just sounded idyllic. And because I really enjoyed the walk and I knew I'd be doing it again, I wanted to get a proper tent. So I upgraded my tent to something much lighter. I got the Lanshan 2 Pro, which would be perfect because it's a 2-man tent for both me and my mum. Besides a few other little bits and bobs, we didn't actually have to get her too much. So this was the pack that I used in my first attempt. It's just a 50 litre, really, I think it cost me 50 quid from Amazon. And it wasn't bad. I mean, it doesn't have any back support. It's just floppy. It doesn't have a, what do you call it? A spine? There's a name. It doesn't have that. So it means it's quite light. And I thought I would use that. I would buy a better pack because I wanted my mom to be as comfortable as possible. But to be honest, we tried both of the packs on. She found that one more comfortable and she was happy to wear that. So she wore that. I upgraded my shoes. These Salomon really, really lightweight trail runners. Now, I knew I would probably have to deal with wet feet if it rained, but I was happy with that because they're so light, they dry quickly, my socks would dry quickly, and having my ankles free would be so much better. So I think all in all, I had 10 kgs, which was perfect. That included water and everything. It was just the perfect weight for me. And my mum, I think, had about 8 kgs. Still a little too heavy than I would like, but she was comfortable. Before the walk, a few weeks before, we'd gone on a 10-mile hike down the canal, and my mum was fitter than I was. I kept having to ask her for breaks, so I wasn't worried about her level of fitness at all. And the pack didn't seem to bother her at all. So she was happy, and that made me, it took a lot of stress off of me because I thought, I don't want my mom to struggle through this. I want it to be nice and easy for her. Now it's really hard to judge the weather because you keep traveling. So just looking at the generic weather in the Highlands, it looked like glorious sunshine, and I was so happy because that idyllic view of me and Mum chilling with our gin was just becoming more real because I thought we're gonna have brilliant weather. However, a few days before, the forecast completely changed and there was a lot of rain coming. My mum's partner also does a lot of walking. He lent me a Gore-Tex raincoat because I was aware the raincoat I had was very thin. We prepared as best we could. We'd already prepped for the rain, but we just made a few extra adjustments because we knew it was going to be a little bit miserable weather-wise. So the day we left, we almost missed our first train, but we got to Glasgow, a very, very wet, miserable Glasgow. And we were waiting there for our connection. And the train was delayed because there was flooding on the rails in Fort William. And that should have been a sign that the weather was horrific. Now there's one thing that I really messed up with when it came to my old pack that my mum used. Now for my first trip, I had my sleeping bag in a compression sack and it was wrapped in a black bag. For some reason, it completely slipped my mind. And I didn't tell my mom to wrap her sleeping bag in the black bag. And that was one of the biggest mistakes that I made on this trip because that rain was relentless. It was big drops that just drove into you. Luckily, there was no wind. It just kind of fell, but it was relentless. Like everything was wet. Your hands are constantly wet. Even when you put them in your pockets, everything is just constantly wet. The aim that day was just to get past Tyndrum. I'd seen just past Tyndrum, there was some, what I thought was suitable wild camping spots. Failing that, there was a couple of campsites along the trail as well that we could stop at. So there was no set plan for day one, but it was going to be a short day. I think no more than 8 miles for the entire day. But one thing I noticed about my mum is she just wasn't eating. She wasn't hungry. Like I was getting hungry a lot. But I guess she just wanted a motor on. She says, I'll eat later. I was like, fine. One thing I really liked about going this time of year was just having more people on the trail. I really liked the solitude that I had before. But seeing when it's so miserable and so rainy and grey, it's nice to see other people kind of going through that thing with you and kind of like, giving each other a thumbs up as you pass because, you know, we're in this together in a way. So that was really nice. Mum, if you're watching this, I should know you better than that. I should know that I should put my foot down every now and then because you say you're fine when you're not fine. And that's my mum. She kind of doesn't want to let people down around her and she'll just be like, oh yes, let's do that, when really maybe she's not feeling up to it. I should have put my foot down. We should have camped there, but we didn't. So we kept on. After about another mile, Mum was saying, I'm really struggling. And I know when Mum starts to vocalize when she's not feeling great, she's really not feeling great. So I was like, right, Mum, we need to, let's just find somewhere. We're wet, we're miserable. We've been in this rain that's been unrelenting. It never stopped all day. Let's try and find somewhere. There was nowhere. I mean, there was just no suitable place to stop. There was this scrubland, like really scrubby grass that was really bouncy, but kind of grew in like a dome. And when you stood on it, it kind of was springy, but then with these big domes of grass. So that was the landscape. It just kept going. I was like, where can we camp? I still said to Mum, listen, the closer we get to Tyndrum, we're kind of getting closer to the little village. There's got to be a campsite nearby, or there's got to be some flat land that we can set up our tent. It's a weird thing. When you're feeling protective over someone and looking out for their welfare, it kind of kicks you into a higher gear. So I suddenly had all this energy and I was on a mission. I needed to get Mum to stop. She was knackered. It had taken a lot out of her. you know, the 8 miles that we had already walked. So I was on a mission. I still said to Mom, listen, I'm gonna walk a little ahead of you in the trail, just scouting. I was like the scout. So you just keep coming. I mean, she could see exactly where she needed to go. And I would just, you know, go really, really quickly down the trail, just constantly scouting, and then loop back to her, say, you know, no joy, Mom, continue on again. And we kept on, and we kept on and on and on. Finally, we made it to kind of this open area, and I saw 2 signs for 2 different campsites. I was like, Mom, there's 2. So the first one we passed, it looked like just motorhomes and caravans and pods that you can book out. So I said, there was no grass to pitch. So I said, well, let's go to the next one. I left my mom under some trees. I said, just wait here. I'm gonna go up there as fast as I can, just see if that's a campsite. If it is, I'll loop back, come and get you, and we'll go pitch up. I get up there, and as soon as I walk in, I just see all this open grass and camper vans. I'm like, we found it. We found somewhere to stop for the night because we need to stop. What could we do? And I even asked if any of their pods were available. I was willing to pay for a pod for the night, but they were all booked. And anyway, she said if we crest the hill just behind the site, there's a stream. If we cross the stream, there's a few really flat grassy areas that are, you know, suitable for camping. So we went. Mom wasn't happy, you know. I don't blame her. Just as we thought we were stopping, we had to carry on. So we crested this hill, and the little stream that normally you can just step over was a river. It was a river. It was just, and I'm thinking, do we cross this? And to our left, there was just this massive hill full of more scrubby land. I was like, there's nowhere else for us to go but go over the stream. But I didn't want us to have to cross this stream. So I ran up this hill so I could survey, you know, scout the area. And she was right. The only place that we could camp was, you know, these 2, one flat area up on a hill and one kind of at the bottom. I said, Mums, we're gonna have to cross. In retrospect, we probably should have taken our shoes off and just walked over, but we didn't. We kind of scrambled as best we could, and Mom's feet got wet, which I was not happy about. So it was time to pitch, and I've only pitched my Lanshan 2 Pro successfully twice. It's a bugger. It's like no other tent I've ever had, and the stars need to align. Everything needs to be perfect for me to get it right. And now I had growing dark. The wind had started to pick up. The rain was still absolutely relentless. So I said, Mom, just give me a second. You just chill as much as you can. There was no shelter. And I just said, give me like 5 minutes. Let me just get the basics pegged out. I'll put my poles in. You get in the dry, and then I'll tighten everything, you know, while you're inside. The problem was the ground was so waterlogged that the pegs just were not biting into the ground like they should have. They were kind of going in and then slowly pulling. So I couldn't get a really nice and tight pitch. It was sagging and the wind wasn't helping. And some of the pegs get like pinging out. Some areas there was rock under, but Mom was already in the tent. I didn't want to say, let's get out and just shift because there could be more rock. So I was just trying my very best. I was out there much longer than I should have been. I was starting to get really cold, and I was like, why am I cold? I almost feel like I'm wet, you know, on my back. Anyway, I get into the tent. I kind of didn't know what to do because I was sodden and I didn't want to get into the nice, dry, warm tent. But I knew taking layers off, I'd get my underlayers wet, and it was just kind of like, I didn't know what to do. I was kind of standing like, I don't know what to do. And Mom's like, meanwhile, she'd been in the tent kind of, you know, blowing up her mattress and getting her shoes off and stuff. And she told me the worst news possible when I finally got into the tent. She said, Mart, my sleeping bag is sodden. Not just wet, not just a little bit damp, absolutely sodden. And my heart just sank, and I thought, man, the way I pitched, I couldn't get the bucket to stay in a bucket. There was bits kind of coming in, there was water coming in. Mom's telling me your sleeping bag is sodden. I am terrified at that point to go into my pack to check the status of my gear, because I was just like, this is a nightmare. We were so tired, Mom, much more than I was, and I just wanted to get her warm and settled, and her stuff was wet. I don't know what to do. So I still said to Mom, let's just have some gin. Let's have some gin. Let's figure out what to do. Let's get completely out of everything wet. Let's get into dry stuff, and let's maybe have something to eat. I was trying to find stuff that we could be positive about. And it was really tough. So anyway, I tried to set up my stuff. The inside of my bag, the main contents was absolutely fine. Mom's was absolutely fine, besides, her down, which had been near the top. I don't mind getting messy and muddy and wet during the day, as long as I know there's somewhere nice and dry and warm and safe at the end of the day. And the fact that my mom had been through quite a grueling day, and we didn't have that. It was just, everything inside was getting wet. There were puddles building like really close, and there were such big puddles, they were starting to stream. And mom was getting paranoid, because she kept looking out the tent saying, that river, just keep an eye on that river, because of the way the Lanshan is. The top kind of comes like this, and there's about a gap this wide so that we can see out. And she's just kept saying to me, check the river, because she was paranoid the river was gonna bust its banks and start kind of coming right into the tent. It was just a nightmare. Anyway, I finally got my sleeping bag out, and it was a little bit wet on the outside, but inside was bone dry. So I was happy with that. One thing that I'd noticed when I took the Gore-Tex raincoat that I'd lent off was my down jacket was really, really wet. We later realized that the jacket hadn't been treated in a while, and the Gore-Tex had failed. And so that wet feeling I'd felt on my back was because the jacket was leaking, and my down was sodden. It wasn't cold, I'm not sure what the temperature was, but when you add the fact that you've been wet all day, and it's now evening and everything's still wet, and the wind is picking up, I was chilled. And I've got a mummy sleeping bag, so we had to share it. So Mom on her sleeping pad here, me on mine, which punctured. I had it on my whole last trip. I haven't used it since, and it was fine, and it kept deflating. It would last about an hour before it was fully deflated. And we were on a slope, so I'd wake up in the night and I'd be on the bare ground sheet. Actually, I had a silver space blanket underneath everything, because that really helps keep the heat in. And so I'd be constantly crinkling on this bloody space blanket, and my sleeping bag would be on the other side, and I'd have to kind of hoist it, blow it up. But because me and my mom were sharing a sleeping bag, and it's a mummy sleeping bag, we had our feet at the ends, and we had it unzipped as far as it could go. So we were kind of like, only our feet were fully covered, and the bottom of our legs up to probably our hips we could cover, and then we were bare from the top. So I was really cold, so we were taking turns spooning on either side. We were keeping each other warm. Our hands were getting really cold, so I dug up my two spare clean socks, and me and my mom used them as gloves for our hands, and we were just snuggling. We didn't sleep. It was micro little sleeps, and then we would wake up, and micro sleep and wake up, and it was just the coldest. I've never felt that feeling of being so exposed and so vulnerable to everything, the elements. I've never had that feeling before, and it was actually pretty scary at points, especially since when the wind really picked up in the night, it really picked up. I mean, that tent, actually thinking about it, withstood the weather like a champ. We had a couple of times I had to go out in the rain because we lost a peg on the corner. When the peg goes, everything on that corner goes. So you can't really kind of ignore it. But other than that, that tent stood like a champ. I'd be confident in that tent withstanding a lot now that it went through that. The only time I was really worried, I was holding on to because the tent is held up by your walking poles. And because the ground was so sodden, the pole wasn't biting into the ground as well as I hoped. And the wind was coming. It was coming through. And I was just, the amount of force I was putting on this walking pole while I'm trying to sleep, because I thought if this pole goes, the whole tent goes. It's the integrity of the tent. These poles are what are like keeping me and my mom semi-dry right now. Man, we were just, I mean, there were times we were just laughing because we had to laugh. Kind of, I can't sleep, Mom. I'm petrified. Take a swig of gin. It was just hilarious. But, you know, we kept each other's spirits up and we kept each other warm because we couldn't like be covered. It was one of the longest nights of my life. It really was. And the wind kept up the entire night. Luckily, the wind was so bad in the night, and hanging my down jacket up on the peg and having that wind flow all through the night through the tent, it was dry as a bone in the morning. And I was so thankful for the wind in the morning that my jacket was dry. So we got into Tindrum. I can't remember the cafe that we went to, but it was amazing. I'll put it somewhere here to give them a shout out because it was so warm in there. We put our bags in the corner, and within the time that we were there, we completely dried out. That was a good stop. We had something to eat. We had tea after tea after tea, and we chatted with loads of really awesome people. People were constantly in and out, and it was just such a morale booster after a horrendous evening. But with my mum's COPD, her cough was quite significant the next day. She didn't sound good. She was a little croaky. I was worried about her, and we tried to make plans on what we could possibly do. Because number one, her sleeping bag needed to be dried. I mean, our gear in general, I just chucked the tent wet and everything into the bag. Everything needed to be out and dried. But looking outside at the weather, we were going to have exactly the same day as we did the day before. I didn't want to put my mom through another night like that. It was just not going to happen. I needed to be guaranteed that she could have a dry night because I was worried about her, and I didn't want to affect her health adversely, just for the sake of continuing. Remember what I told you about my mom? She doesn't she tries to put everyone before herself, basically. So she'll be like, if you really want to do it, I'll do it with you. But deep down, I know she wants to go. I didn't, but I did because I wanted her to be okay. And I didn't, that night affected me a lot. I didn't want to have any risk that we'd have to go through a second night like that because that would just be horrendous. So we made the decision, we made the call. I said, Mum, should we go? She's like, let's go. And that's what we did. And you know what? There's no regrets with that trip. I think we made the best decision we could have done, considering I think our life would have been completely different if I told my mum to wrap the sleeping bag and wrap, you know, generally her stuff in a black bag like I did before, which completely just dropped out of my brain. So I take full responsibility for that. I was just gutted because we were both looking forward to it. And I think when you've got this kind of ideal thing in your head about what it's going to be and it's the complete opposite, that can be a bit of a reality chop across the face. So that's the story. Both fails due to me being a noob and not taking everything into account. The weather in Scotland is never a guarantee. Prepare for absolutely everything. Make sure you have adequate rain gear, that your stuff is kept dry, so you know even if you do get soaked throughout the day, you've got a dry, warm place to sleep at night. There's nothing worse than putting yourself through an ordeal with the hope that you'll get this little, ball of goodness at the end, and really open the ball of goodness and it's more ordeal, and you just think, I can't deal with this ordeal. Learn from my mistakes, guys. Prepare, prepare, prepare. Think about, if I was without this thing, would I miss it? If it's a resounding yes, you need that thing, and make sure it's the best version of that thing that you can get. So if you're going for a raincoat, make sure that it can handle strong rain, relentless rain. If it can't, make other plans on top of that to try and kind of combat that. You've only got one pair of shoes, make sure they're the right pair of shoes for you, because if they bugger your feet up, then you're done as well. Because even if you then bought a new pair of shoes, you still have buggered feet under your new pair of shoes. So when you're planning for your journey, weigh these things up. If this goes wrong, is it going to be really that bad? Yes, it is. Well, then you really need that thing. If this goes wrong, is it going to be that bad? No, not really. Well, maybe you don't need that thing, and maybe only take it if you have the space and the weight allocation to deal with it. So my top piece of advice, if you're doing any kind of trail, it doesn't even need to be this trail, is shelter, warmth, and feet. Your feet are going to carry you there. Shelter is what's going to protect you from the elements, and regardless of anything, make sure that you can be warm and dry over and above everything else. Everything on top of that is a bonus. Yes, eating is important, but it's something that you can quickly pick up on the trail. Am I making any sense? I don't know. This video is going on really, really long, and I know I'm going to have a nightmare editing it. But I hope you've enjoyed my West Highland Way mishaps. Let my misfortune be a learning curve for not only myself, but for you too. Prepare for the weather, and make sure you're as fully prepared as you possibly can be before you set off, and you'll be absolutely fine. I'm going again in a few weeks, and I am so excited. I'm gonna take you guys with me. I'm just gonna do, a few videos throughout, every day of my travels, just to document it, and hopefully you find it interesting. So the next time you see me, I'll probably be back from my third attempt. I'm not gonna call it a third attempt. It's gonna be the one. It's not an attempt, it's the one. We're gonna do it. All right, I think that wine has gone to my head a little bit. So before I waffle on forever, I'll love and leave you, and I'll see you guys really soon. Mwah.